Hello, welcome to Chess with Simon. I'm Simon. Chewy's not here. In fact, I'm not here. You can't see me, but that's, probably an improvement. We're going to play a 30-minute rapid game, and we're going to try to make it really, really complicated and tactical and interesting. So we're always going to try and play the line that produces the most tension and complexity. We could also play 15 plus 10 if there's not a... Let's have a look at open challenges. Open challenges, 20 plus 10, 30 plus 5. Oh, there goes the 10-minute game. 30 minutes, okay, this one. Okay, so what we're going to try to do is to aim to keep the tension. I was tempted to play the Dutch then, but let's play this instead. Okay, what do we think, party people? C5? I think C5. Keep the tension. Okay, so White's playing pretty solidly here. I think we're going to fianchetto. I don't think White is going to want to take on C5. So let's have a look. G6 takes. What do we do after takes? We play A5 perhaps. I'm not overly worried about takes. I assume we'll see knight F3. Knight F3. Okay, takes. Well, isn't that interesting? Now we've got options now. We can just ignore that and fianchetto. Okay. Let's just pretend it hadn't happened. Let's just get the king to safety and then see what we can pick off in the centre. The point is, I think that playing moves like b4 are really risky with that bishop on the long diagonal, because, I mean, for instance, knight e4, and already there's a bit of tension, but, well, there we go. White's played it. So, okay, knight e4. Bishop b7, a5, a3, takes on b4, takes on b4, takes the rook. Okay. Okay. a5, so, okay. You know what I suppose I think? I suppose I think knight e4 is a bit of a rush. I think you probably just exploit the positional features. What I'm going to do is castle. Let's just exploit it positionally. We're going to play a5. So right now, this is a threat, because if we take on b4, okay, so take on b4, the a pawn has to take, then you take the rook. So it's a threat. What about b6 here? b6. Oh, I like this. Why do I like it? Well, the other thing is, what about knight c6? Yeah, I like knight c6. I assume that's going to lead to... Knight c6 will lead to b5. Ooh. Knight e5. But then what? Who knows what then? You know, you could argue that White's doing alright here. You could. You could. Okay, takes on b4, pawn takes on a1, bishop takes. Knight c6. So what? b6 Wow, come on, I think we're going to play b6. This is pretty. So, yeah, well, White didn't spend long thinking about that move. Okay, so I'm okay with this. We're developing. Might play d5. I think I might quite like d5. How about bishop a6? What's the point of d5? The point of d5 is to really box White in. Okay, I like bishop a6. It's a developing move. And if takes, I think we take with a knight. And I don't think... oh, there's no queen takes d7. But maybe that bishop will move anyway, so maybe we can save a tempo. If you take with the queen, maybe you can stop White castling. Knight e4, bishop d3, bishop b7, bishop takes e4, bishop takes e4, the view to playing queen b7. I want to get a rook on the C file. Okay, well, if I'm going to do that, let's put the bishop on b7 now. Look at that. Fast. But now I think this stops White developing the queen's knight, and it also stops the pawn push. I just think this kind of keeps White bottled up on the queen's side. I assume White will castle. Rook c8. I think then rook c8 starts to really increase the pressure. Got to be a little bit careful we don't drop the d pawn, but currently the knight on b8 is defending it. So now I'm considerably less keen. Okay. Queen move. Yeah, that queen move just makes me want to play rook c8 all the more. Because now the c pawn is pinned against the queen. In fact, actually what we're threatening here is pawn takes on b4, a pawn takes on a1, bishop takes on a1, and then actually you can take on b4, and when the pawn takes you take the queen. And if White takes on e4 you take back with the queen. So the threat is, so castles takes on b4, a takes b4, takes on a1, bishop takes a1, queen takes b4, pawn takes b4, rook takes queen. What will White do? Bishop d3 is quite good, isn't it? Bishop d3. I mean, by the way, my little so-called combination only restores material equality. It doesn't sort of win. But I'm claiming, and I don't really know this is true, I'm claiming we end up with a better position. For instance, does a bishop drop at the end? Well, the bishop hangs on a1 at the end, but yeah, and there's a bishop hanging on e2 as well. So yeah, good move. Good move. Okay, so let's keep white guessing. Well, there is always f5, isn't there? We talked about maintaining the tension. So let's play f5. You know, I mean, it's alright, isn't it? f5. So now if the bishop takes, we take back with the bishop, and I like that. I like that. I think, so let's review our tactics. Well, the queen on c2 isn't undefended anymore, because the bishop's defending it, so that's a bit disappointing. So takes on b4, a takes on a1, bishop takes. We can't take on b4 with the queen, because the queen on c2 is defended by the bishop on d3. This is a good move. Okay. So I have to get my pieces out, don't I? So let's just do that. So I like this. This is making the square on d7 for the knight. I assume white will castle. Well, I assume wrong. Okay, so now the knight's going to come to c5, really nice square. The bishop will exchange itself on e4, and we'll take back with the bishop, and then maybe the square b3 will look nice for my c5 knight. So for instance, castles, knight c5, bishop e4, bishop e4. If the queen goes to d2 or c1, there's a fork on b3, so the queen has to go to d1. You know, I mean, then maybe, you know, well, yeah, the good thing about d1 is it's also covering the f3 knight. Maybe bishop d5 threatens. Oh, it's check. Okay. So that's interesting. So I don't like this move, but maybe I need to think about why. But because there's a really nice fork on c5. Okay, so well, I'm just going to put the king in the corner. I'm not going to play pawn d5 because I like the pawn on d6. So now I'm absolutely warming up to play knight c5, queen back to c2, takes on d3, takes on d3, knight c5, and then maybe bishop. I assume it'll go queen d1. That's not very good for me, really. Not particularly good for me. I mean, I do have a choice, actually. Look, how about this? Okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is okay. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this. And then when the queen goes to, like, D, I'm going to disrupt the pawns around the king. This isn't the greatest move the world has ever known, but it's something, because I don't think, okay, here's what I'm claiming. what I'm claiming is that white's extra pawn is a backward pawn in an open file, so it's not that useful. And okay, let's see if I can do. And now this opening around the king is handy. So you know, knight e5, bishop e2, queen b7, queen d1. Loving that bishop on the dark square diagonal. How about the move? This is a funny move, isn't it? F4. It's a strangely appealing move. The only problem with F4 is E4. Okay, how about this? Takes on d3, queen takes, queen e4, queen e2, queen b7, knight d2, bishop takes on c3, bishop takes, rook takes. It's alright, isn't it? Okay, let's do that. Queen's got to take. This is a nice knight. Oh, look, this knight can sit on c4 as well. I quite like that. I quite like that knight sitting on c4. It's a real pain, isn't it? Or also a rook. Maybe we transfer a rook through c4 to h4. I mean, the queen's got to go to d1 or e2 here. So the idea might be, I quite like this. Okay, so let's look at some options here. Knight c4, where's that bishop going? Knight c4, bishop c1, yuck. Okay, next, queen b7, knight d2, nah. Next, rook c4, knight d2, rook h4, yeah, I like that. I like that, it's just menacing. Yeah, activity. Okay, so white gets to develop, but black's active. And I think white's going to find it hard to break out. Knight d2 here is a must, I think. Well, it's not a must, but I think it's very likely. Then just rook h4. And also, I think black might have knight d3 in some lines. The rook on h4 it's just very cool because it's hard to remove. And I mean, if I was ambitious, well, you could say rook ac8 and exchange sacrifice. Probably viable, actually, but I'm not going to do it because it's not necessary. But on h4, the rook's not only eyeing the h2 pawn, it's also eyeing the a4 pawn, so it pins down the other rook. Oh, well, I suppose the queen's defending a4, but you know, it's that a4 pawn is weak, and it'll stay weak for a long time. White will argue that Agan 21 will argue Indonesia, come on down. Can't take on a4, unfortunately. Okay, I really like the rook there. I mean, actually, party people, rook h3 is now a credible threat, followed by taking on f3. And also queen b7 is now a credible threat, followed by the knight arriving on f3. I think knight a3 was a bit of a mistake. That's my argument. If I need a positional developing move, I'll play rook c8. But I think, okay, so that's a good move, isn't it? Now, so, well, it's not that good, because what we do have is knight f3 check, queen takes f3, bishop takes b2, queen takes a8 check, winning. Okay, so we're not going to do that. So what if we play queen b7, then I think maybe what white might want is to take on e5, but if we take back with the bishop, then h2 is hanging. What about if we just play rook c8 and just play positionally and just say we're developing? I like those sort of moves. I mean, actually, by the way, we can just take on c4. I don't particularly like it, but we can. Okay. Options, options, options. So, queen b7, bishop takes e5, bishop takes e5, f4. Take the rook. We take the rook. Okay, you've persuaded me. This is a good move. Bishop takes e5, bishop takes e5, attacking h2 and attacking a1. So that's probably winning. So what can white do? White could conceivably go king g2. At which point I would say rook c8, maybe g5, but I don't really like it. Bit loose. There's no real obvious profit in knight g4, although the pawn is pinned. It's not obvious where the knight's going. Oh well, the knight could. No, I don't like knight g4 because the bishop takes g7 check, king takes g7, and then there's queen d4 check, and the knight's covering the rook. I think probably we just want to play rook c8, don't we? Put the rook in an open file. So what are the positional factors here, really? White's got a weak king, although black's king's not great. I suppose as long as the dark square bishop's there, black's king's alright. Black's got pressure on the king side for sure. I mean, basically, the threat is knight f3 check, and then rook h2, which will also be a check, and will not always be made because the king could come to g3, but it's pretty grim. So knight f3 check is the threat. Okay, well, that's not silly. So knight f3 check still works. The king marches to g2, because if it goes to h1, then rook h2 is mate. Okay. Knight f3 check, king h2. Queen can't take, of course. Takes queen. I take the queen. White takes the queen. I take the bishop. White takes my rook. I take the rook. Take the rook. I win. Okay, fine. So I need to take here with check. I mean, you can reverse the order, but it doesn't make any difference. So here, king has to go to g2 because h1 is mate. I take the queen. Oh, he can take the bishop first, look. He'll take on g7 first. Clever. It is what it is. He didn't do it. Okay, that's a pity, because actually taking on g7 would have been right there. But it's understandable. Chess is a hard game. Now, I think what we're going to see is either takes on f3, in which case I take on a1, or rook a2, in which case I go knight d2. Oh no, maybe I just take on a3. Yeah, I take on a3, don't I? So knight d2 takes on b2, takes the rook. But if you take on a3, you're out with a whole piece, aren't you? This is winning a whole piece. Because there are two minor pieces and you can only take one. Whichever one you take, I'll retreat the other one. And then what's the material count? What's the pawns count? It says I'm +6 now, so it's just equal pawns. So we have to be slightly careful about this protected pass pawn. Now I'm feeling funny, I should have taken on a4. So white should take, yeah. Okay. So did we take on a2 here? Oh gosh, decisions. Take on a2, rook h1. There is then knight f3 again. You can get away with it. This is a little bit of a high wire act. Take on h2. The rook will go to h1. We then play knight f3. You can't take on f3 because I take on h1. If you take on h1, I take with a knight. I mean, this is... You must not do this because this is a bad habit, because actually the right thing to do really is to go knight d2 and then when the rook moves go knight e4 and just say we're better. But just for the fun we'll go knight h2 and then we'll come to g4 unless the rook goes to h1, in which case we'll go back to f3. Okay, it's a deal. Rook h1. Because if you don't play rook h1, then it's knight g4, and then my rook can come to h2, threatening f2. So I think rook h1 is a very human move, which wasn't played. Okay, so what's white threatening? Well, probably threatening to take on e7 at some point, right? I think we care about that. We've got to be a bit careful here. Okay, the idea is for this rook to hold everything together. So for instance, after b6 the rook goes to b7 and just tries to hold everything together while the other pieces have time to come back. There is a check at the back, but it doesn't do anything. Well, I mean, it checks me, but it doesn't create any threat after king g7. So what are we? We're a pawn and a piece. So the idea is not to mess this up, really. Okay, let's just assume it's all going to be fine, right? That e pawn may drop. I mean, if I was being, probably the really best way to play would be to play king g7 and defend the e pawn with the king, but I haven't done it. I'm sort of claiming I'm going to go rook h2. I don't know, really. Then maybe this is all a bit wrong. I mean, rook h2, king f3, rook f2 is mate, isn't it? Yeah, it's mate. That's funny. So, white might be thinking about that. The king can just go to g1 though. I don't want to create kind of a race. I think better would just be to go after. So, okay, I think what we might see is rook c7, takes on c7, takes on c7. It's really important that we don't let that b pawn queen. Yeah, that's really important that we don't let that happen. So we've got to really analyse this. So here's let's really analyse it. Takes on c7, rook takes on c7, rook h2 check, king g1, rook f2, pawn b6, rook b2, pawn b7. We got a problem. We got a problem. Okay, so we're not going to do any of that because we're not going to catch that meaningless pawn on f2. Instead, we're just going to put the knight somewhere sensible. I'm not nervous, honestly. We're going to put the knight somewhere sensible, like e5, and we're going to swing the rook. Okay, so let's do the analysis. Okay, how about this? Knight f6, pawn b6, knight takes on d5, pawn b7, knight takes c7, pawn b8 equals queen check, wins the knight. That's bad. Knight on f6, pawn b6, rook b4, pawn b7, king g7, escapes. Whew! Oh boy, I like to escape. The point is, you don't want the king trapped on the back rank with the pawn on b7. King can't run, and then there's a threat of the rook check on c8. So pawn b6 I think is the really dangerous move here, and I'm glad to announce that this is going to save us, or save me. If I lose, it's not your fault. Yeah. Phew. Alright, so this was close, but this pawn now can't queen. The rook can take on e7 with check, my king can run to h6. Then I just start collecting. Collect on d5, and the knight can just cause trouble. For instance, the knight can take on a4, the rook has to keep guarding the pawn, the king's pretty powerless. This is fine, this is technically won, but that needed precise calculation, not to get tempted by the f2 pawn. Or trying to get white to blunder by playing king f3 and then mate took on f2. That's just silly. It's just playing for tricks. For instance, if black tries to take on d6, then we take on b7 on black. Sorry, if white tries to take on b6, d6. So, if white tries to take on d6, we take on b7, and white has nothing. I mean, an interesting move to explore is rook e6. Knight takes on, yeah, rook e6, knight takes on d5, yeah. Okay, so, but I think this is okay. I mean, this isn't bad at all by white, but white has to revert to defending that b pawn. So, if I took now, probably got a drawn rook and pawn endgame, but the issue is more this, where again that pawn just can't quite be defended because the rook's behind the passed pawn, right? Yeah, exactly. And what's coming is knight c5, which will really end all of my worries. I mean, not that I had worries, but you know, which will clarify the position. Yeah, thank you. Good game. Okay, let's have a look at the game. It was interesting though. Quite original, I think. What does the computer think? The computer thinks that my opponent played well. Comeback win. Eek. Okay. I'm better here. So here knight takes. Okay. Knight takes. Knight takes. Takes. This. This. Oh, and the bishop can't take. The bishop can't take because of the check at the back, look. Okay, that's nice. Because the bishop's pinned against the queen. Okay, so this bishop move was wrong because you can take with a knight on c3. And then the point is when you take on b4 you're attacking the pinned bishop. So white has to find a way to take that. Yeah, it's pretty stuff. It's pretty stuff, and it's with check as well, so you can't take on a8. White can't take on a8. Okay, that was nice. So I didn't like this, but I did. That was a good move. This was not a good move. Preferred d5. This was fine. Okay. White's a little better. This is a good move. This is a good move. This was okay. Oh, look, it likes f4. Yeah, we looked at f4. This was a good move. Now white's better. Yeah. For some reason f4 is a slightly hard move to play, but it really likes... Okay. Yeah, this knight move I think was a mistake, and I think we all thought that. Or I thought that. Rook g8. Okay, don't get that. I guess, is that to push the g-pawn? This was the mistake. Look, this queen move was the mistake. Got it wrong. Because, he wanted to take with the queen. The computer wants to take the queen, I think, to avoid this problem. Yeah, the bishop should take there with check. So why is it better if we take this way? So you have to take, then it's check here. Yeah. Then the point is that there's no chance to take on g7 with check, whereas the way I played it, now there's a chance for white to take on g7 with check. Whereas if you play it the other way around, take the queen first, there's no chance to take on g7 with check. Okay, so here, didn't like me taking this, would rather I would have played the knight move. Alright, whatever you say. And okay, look, the computer wanted rook h2. Greedy computer. The computer wanted... I got the endgame right, look. The computer wanted... Okay, I don't quite agree with the way the computer played it in the end, but there we go. I wouldn't have done that. But here, the computer thought it could make rook h2 work. Is that right? Rook h2 is best. So king g3. What about king g1 though? Takes f2. Push. Oh, hang on. Push. I just miscounted. Rook here. Push. And we've still got time to get out. I thought the e7 pawn was gone, but with this we've still got time to get out. The danger is rook c8 check and then queening on b8, but actually you're out. so it's fine. So this was a bit better, but to be honest with you, I saw a line that worked and I knew one and I played it, and I don't feel too guilty about that. It's a very human thing, which is the big problem, was that B pawn, and so I don't feel particularly guilty about handling that, because if you know it's winning, just do it, right? You know, if something wins an extra pawn on f2, frankly, I know that for the computer it's better, but it wasn't really that important. Thank you so much for watching. I enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed this. If you enjoyed it, please hit like. If you'd like to see more, hit subscribe and the bell, and we'll send you more. See you soon.